For people now, like poo-pooing on the actual funnel, saying that the funnel's bigger than just TOFU and BOFU. How do you define the funnel now, and how do you define the middle of the funnel for teams when you're working on content strategy?
Yeah, I think of it in a classic way as far as the buyer's journey is just that awareness and then that consideration and the decision. And then maybe from the product side is you have that larger awareness and then the solution aware and then the product aware. So I really think about the solution aware and decision in that same framework.
Gotcha. No, I love that. A lot of people aren't familiar with that concept. So, not problem
Mhm.
aware, you're not even in the funnel, right? You are in that information seeking journey or the problem finding journey. You may still need to create content at that stage, but certainly
Sure.
that's not in the is not in the funnel yet. And then you have that awareness, consideration, purchase, and then you've got
Oh,
post purchase.
yeah.
Yeah, post purchase troubleshooting. You've got implementation. You got content for your customers. So, what differentiates middle of the funnel? And if someone's not familiar, like they're not doing this at all, what types of things would exist in that bucket?
Yeah, I think the solution aware is really the right way to think of it. So I need new accounting software, or I'm having a trouble with my accounting software, or I need this new feature. And so you have a problem, you need a solution. You're just not exactly sure which one. So you're not sure if it's QuickBooks, FreshBooks, or Bill.com or whatever your need is. And so then as far as search goes, then you'll start the journey with those more like I call them like industry specific or generic type words around a solution before you actually start naming any brands. And so that's how I would think about defining it is the problem is very clear and then you need a solution. You're just not putting a brand name to that particular solution. So if you're driving down the highway, you need lunch, you need a solution, which is food, but then you have your multiple choices that you're then going to pick out. You're just not quite sure what's at that exit. That's how maybe another way to think about it as well.
I love it. It's that the unbranded funnel, the
Sure.
challenges that you're focusing on. And one way I've heard people, and you described it very eloquently, and I've heard people say, what if you weren't allowed to put the brand on it? So a lot of times it's a great way to describe it the way that you did. So, how do you go about building authority that will allow you to perform on these middle of the funnel terms? What is the process that you go out? Do you need the entire funnel covered first? Can you start in the middle of the funnel? I know a lot of people a long time ago would start at the bottom because they thought that was the trick to getting quick sales, but then they realized you actually have to have content at all stages of the funnel. Can you start just at the middle, or do you need some infrastructure for topics that you're targeting?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, I would say most of the time I'm entering into companies now that do have some type of content. It's very rare to have somebody I have absolutely nothing. I guess it depends on your industry, but in B2B SaaS, they at least have some type of content around there. And so what I find though is don't have that decision type content. So it's either like brand or just really high level, like what is type awareness content. And so then what I'm finding is that they have this baseline of that expertise, authority, and some level of trust. So in those cases, yes, I can step in usually and create middle funnel content because you have that baseline. And the way that I like to think about it is yes, start there because middle funnel content in my experience has pretty good volume and it allows you to use that as a MVP, so to speak, or a prototype to test out some ideas to see how it goes because you have enough volume to like prove that concept out. Whereas if you just have this very strong foundational layer of bottom funnel content, you might not have the volume that you need. Of course, it does depend on your industry, as always. Big, huge disclaimer. But generally speaking, especially for these kind of like solution aware type terms, the middle funnel does work out a lot better.
Are questions analysis part of this research that goes into middle of the funnel? Is it problem analysis, benefits analysis, feature comparisons? What are the types of things, or is it all of the above? Or what are the types of content that one might build, and then what are they targeting?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There are certain formats that I've found personally worked out really well. I would say list work very well. G2 Crowd, Zapier, a lot of these brands have just built huge SEO, Wirecutter for that matter, to think of a little bit more consumer, have just built like huge brands off of just lists like that. Templates is another one that I would say work pretty well. And it's something that I'm personally investing a lot of time in right now at Range. For example, we need a weekly staff meeting template. We know what the problem is. We need to organize our meeting notes. We need to organize our agendas, but we don't necessarily have a product that we're tapping into for that. We don't have a product name. In my case, I want them to use range for that. And then I would say the third kind of main way I've seen this is just how to solve a particular problem. So you have a developer, how to solve the XYZ problem. Linear can help with that, or Launch Darkly, or whatever the program is that you need to be able to do something. And they can then slide in their better solution to solving that problem. You'll see that in a lot where someone's like, if I'm like Googling for my iPhone, it's here's how you solve for Android, here's how you solve for Mac, here's how you solve for Mac OS. Maybe this can also help you improve that. And then you could put your product in there as well. So that very actionable, how do you solve this issue without tagging a specific branded type term to it is the way I think about it.
Right on. And no, that I think that's great because it gets into how I can turn that into pragmatic value. How do you approach in B2B tech, or this would apply to most, how do you approach competition, using competition to your advantage, using feature knowledge? I love how you described covering adjacent areas of the industry. It can be a very successful project, like not on the nose. It's not something that's obvious. How do you approach discussions of competitors, competitive feature differentiation, and all that in content for B2B?
Yeah, I think it's important to be honest. And usually you have to realize that people are searching for this in multiple places. They might as well just come to you to find the answer. So I'm going to list my number one or second competitor very closely to us and go ahead and call out the differences, because I know they'll probably be looking at those solutions anyway. So I might as well have them look at it in my list post like all together. So here's why competitor one is different than us. Here's why competitor two is different than us. And here's also why competitor three that you may not have even thought of, or the old way that you've been doing it, is different than us. Because I think that's very important too, is if somebody is doing a to-do list on a notepad, you could call that out and say, here's why our to-do list app is better than a notepad. So you're also calling out the traditional way of doing things in these type of lists that may not even occur to somebody as well. And then secondly, I would note, so I would say it's okay to do that. Some people don't agree with that. But then secondly, is I just try to be fair and call out what we do better and what they do as well. And sometimes I'll highlight different things, but I really want to say like why we solved something in a better way. And then I turn to sites like G2 Crowd, Trust Radius, those type of B2B comparison sites to then maybe pull a review or two or to highlight what we do as well. And those can be looked at as more of a middle ground or fair judge in some of those cases, especially for B2B software. Broadly speaking, I just think, hey, people are doing these searches, they're doing these comparisons anyway. They might as well do it on my site and weed out or funnel out those ICPs that may not be great for you. So if you're going after a certain buyer and they're searching for a different option, then you want to go ahead and weed out some of those buyers from the start. And so I say, go for it and let the person make their decision. And I'd rather them make that decision on my side than on somebody else's side.
Describe to me top of funnel support, how bottom of the funnel supports, and then kind of where does the inspiration come from for middle of the funnel content? And then where does the inspiration come from for this? Is it stuff you're already ranking for? Is it coming from internal research? How do you come up with this strategy and when it's appropriate and when it's not?
Yeah. So just looking at this screen or this bad graphic that I drew on the screen here, I was thinking of this as like different than the traditional pillar content way is where you kind of have this very broad, short key topic that you then hopefully build this pyramid up to start ranking for. And Jeff is better at this than I am, but personally, I could never get those to rank very well for me. Maybe I just didn't have the time. So instead, I like decided I would invert it a little bit to where, hey, if I want people to be aware of what I'm doing, I'll build the pillar page towards the middle funnel instead. And so that's what this graph or this drawing is trying to illustrate here. So what I'm thinking of is I have my top of the funnel awareness type posts. I'm then linking down to my middle funnel solution aware. And then you can see that FOFU bottom funnel is really close to it, is I usually have another landing page that middle funnel links to that's very specific on product. And then everything else underneath is topic authority to help build that expertise, authority, and trust. So that could be my interviews, that could be my how-tos, my expertise, like here's what I'm finding, my trend reports, my industry reports, all of those things would then link back up to my middle funnel on a particular topic. So I was going over this with somebody on my team earlier today. I have a middle funnel post right now. I'm trying to rank around team communication tools. If you Google that, I'm competing against myself with some other companies I've worked for. But then what I can do is I can create a specific landing page about team communication. I can link all of my posts, my interviews about team communication into that. And then I don't have a post like this, but my what is team communication or best practices for team communication would be my top of the funnel support. And then those would link back down to my middle funnel. And so that's what this drawing is like trying to illustrate. And then I would break this off for each of my kind of, you could do it by feature set or topic clusters. That's a really great point to bring up is like most of the sites I've implemented this on, I'm going to refer to the Ahrefs domain authority, different discussion, different point, but like kind of the 50 to 70 range is where I was like trying to punch up against people higher than me that are like in the 85s to 90s or whatever. So I've been in project management software for a while in productivity tools. So I was competing against the Atlassians, the Asanas. I was at ClickUp for a while where I also pioneered this and they were not as big as they are now. So yes, this was a way to try to gain some of that market share without knowing my what is agile will never get. I mean, it could, but out of the gate, it's not going to get to that top spot when I'm just trying to explain some of these concepts. So I can have that post. I just know it's feeding into my middle funnel. And so my expectations are different. My expectation is not to rank for that really short keyword phrase. It's to rank for that. This is another point we should probably talk about is my middle funnel queries are a little longer, right? They're like in that 4 to 6 keyword range, not that really short one. And I can still build those posts. I just don't expect them to be at number one. I expect my middle funnel post to be number one, number three on the top five.
So this is usually the hardest part for everyone to understand about this discussion. We've never had this discussion, but it's so funny that you described it. So all this content working together as a mass. It is basically gathering power on this topic and all the branches of this topic to give you the opportunity to rank. And so that in your case, the way you're describing it is you're setting expectations appropriately. That early stage awareness stuff, the pre-funnel informational stuff, you have to build it to tell the story
You
that you're
do.
an expert. You have to build
Yeah.
it, even if it will get no traffic. All right. You got to
Yeah.
build it to give yourself the opportunity for the middle of the funnel to perform. We're two of very few people who think that way, but it works. And that's what we got to think about. The hard thing about this is getting people to understand they have to invest in content that's not going to perform.